rolling right now. So as I said, just gonna keep it casual, keep it
Totally
conversational. It's just some chat with a coffee.
Perfect.
That's all it is.
Coffee chats are great.
Good. So today with us we have John Lusk, Senior Vice President and COO of Spire Maritime. So I think some of the listeners or people probably heard about the company before, which obviously we're gonna dive into more and help people understand. You have been with the company since 2018.
That's correct.
Right,
Yeah.
and previously led the Global Data Service Group, which includes Maritime, Aviation and Weather. So more than 25 years experience driving go-to-market strategy and delivering unparalleled customer experience with B2B and B2C industries ripe for this disruption. And obviously we saw this action is happening today in the ISC during the time, and it's great to see and great to have you at the ISC.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
So prior to Spire, you've been at the Lusk Group LLC, which obviously we'd like to learn more. Strategic consulting and advisor firm that you founded, and also served as entrepreneur in residence at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. Beautiful, a nonprofit focused on entrepreneurship and education, which obviously at Altair Enterprises, that's what we're all about.
Yep.
So once again, great to have you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the coffee, as we had many today. But look, as some of the things I wanted to discuss today, obviously we have a presentation open for the ones who have not been ISC, obviously, just to hear about Spire. And it talked about harnessing space to solve the global supply chain crisis. So can you explain what that is for people in the first place?
Yes, I mean the global supply chain crisis, just to understand what that is essentially a crisis that is a offshoot of the fact that there's so many delayed shipments, right? And when you have delayed shipments, it has a downstream impact on the economy, including large corporations, small businesses, and ultimately consumers. So if goods, consumer goods specifically, aren't making it into port on time, they're not getting down into the consumer's hands on time. It has just this massive global impact that's downstream. So that's kind of that's the global supply chain crisis, and there's other factors that go into that. But what we're seeing with this global supply chain crisis is much more investment in terms of data and data analytics, understanding how to solve and prepare for and mitigate the risks associated with that crisis. And we've learned that space data, so data is collected from space, but Earth data that's collected from space, that can play a really significant part in understanding how to mitigate some of these supply chain risks.
Right. And we're talking about big markets as I was looking at here, so 15 trillion, we're looking at maritime, right?
That's just maritime.
That's just
maritime. So I mean, if you think about the global supply chain, $21 trillion in just consumer goods. I think services is about another 7 trillion globally that's imported or exported, and that's going to increase by about 15% in 2022. 90% of everything that we can touch, wear, anything that's material goods, 90% is shipped over the ocean.
Wow. So when it's thinking about harnessing space to solve, so if we put an X on that, so what will be an X, like how much we can help into solving the global supply chain crisis? Like what will be an X? Is it 10X, 100X, like space-based data? How much?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a space data, I mean, in general, I mean, you're not going to solve the global supply chain crisis with just one data set.
Yep.
Right? I mean, there's an infinite number of data sets that you need to be able to look at to really understand, one, what's happening, get those trends and kind of get that grasp. Two, to make predictions on what could happen next, and then three, like what you should do, right? So it's going to take more than one data set, but space data is a very unique data set because it's incredibly hard to get, and it gives you a sense of what's happening around the Earth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so you can use that one data set in combination with other data sets to get better ideas of what's happening to mitigate that risk. So when we say like 1X, 10X, 100X, I mean, I think, given the fact that we historically haven't put the amount of focus and investment into the supply chain as we are now. The fact that the maritime industry in particular is just now starting to really get traction from a digital transformation phase, I would put it at 100X. Wow. I mean, I think 10 years from now, we're going to be talking about the supply chain, both from a maritime perspective and an aviation perspective, in a much different way. It's going to be much more data driven. It's going to be much more automated. There's always talk about autonomous shipping, right?
Right.
Just like there's autonomous vehicles, you're going to start seeing that start to come into fruition as well. So I think it's 100x
Yes.
in terms of the efficiency, in terms of those risk mitigation. You're still going to have the factors that can cause crises because some of those factors are out of our control. Geopolitical, right? Global pandemics.
Maybe space data can help to predict that.
That's the thing. That's the thing is that as a space data can be used to help predict that. Earth observations can be used again with combinations from other data sets to maybe help predict some of that, particularly with extreme weather.
Yes.
Right. And that's
we see a lot of these.
Geopolitical is a little bit tougher, right? Because you just don't know, like that involves human mindsets.
Exactly, which is very unpredictable.
It's really unpredictable, right? I mean, we all talk about technology being hard, but human minds. That's a different. That's a completely different animal.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, another thing, John, speaking about the supply chain crisis, there is this popular opinion, like outside the space industry, that space industry is some sort of a bubble, right? And it's kind of all the companies doing deals with each other, and there is no out-servicing happening, right? But I mean, Spire being the company that it is, having over 150 satellites successfully deployed, right, is the prime example of a company that crushes those opinions, right? So could you talk more about the causes of the supply chain, like the fundamental reasons why the supply chain crisis occurs, and how Spire's space-based generated data helps to solve those crises day to day, so to prevent the accumulation of those crises and setbacks in the supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about the supply chain crisis, for me there are kind of four driving factors of that crisis. One is that vessels or aircraft, they're being delayed, and when anything is delayed from getting from point A to point B, there's just all this downstream impact, right? It just keeps going. There's a domino effect. So one is the delaying in vessels. The other one is just all the shortages. You have shortages in containers. You have shortages in labor. You have durable goods shortages, component shortages. All of that actually fuels some of that crisis as well. And then you have the general strain on the supply chain. That's increased costs. That's not knowing when vessels will arrive, which is kind of tied to delayed vessels. It's understanding how to manage berth operations and port operations so that you can relieve some of that strain. And then you have the environmental component, which is again an offshoot of the crisis, which is increased CO2 emissions. When I think about where most of our customers, and the key thing to think about here is, for the most part, Spire provides the data to our customers, who are then building the analytics and the solutions to address the global supply chain. And so I'm using that as a proxy of where they're primarily focusing. And I see really, two primary areas where most of our customers are focusing to really try to address those supply chain concerns. One is an estimated time of arrivals. Really trying to understand, okay, if this ship is leaving the port, at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, and they say they're going to be at the next port, at 8 o'clock in the morning the following Tuesday, 8 days later, that's going to be relatively accurate, because right now it's not. On average, ETA's estimated time of arrivals are off 40 to 60 hours. So it's next to impossible to plan. If you're a port, how do you know if that ship's going to come in or not? How long do you actually reserve that berth for? So a lot of our customers are investing a lot of time and resources and investment in building algorithms to better predict the future around ETA. So they're taking our data, they're taking historic data, they're looking at it, they're analyzing it, they're bringing in weather events, right, into their models, forecasting weather events to try to understand, can we get to a point where we have better estimated time of arrivals? So I think that's one way where that space data, again, combined with other data sets, including weather data, you can start to get a better sense of improving that ETA number, even if you're able to improve it by 10%. That's a big change, right? The other area where we're seeing a lot of investment is that offshoot of emissions. Right, we're seeing a lot of companies really trying to understand. Okay, they know it's coming down. I mean, the IMO is about to pass, or just passed a number of emissions sort of laws that are kind of tied to what Europe is trying to do with the CO2 neutral, carbon neutral in 2050. But companies are focused on route optimization. They want to have the most efficient routes because that saves fuel. So that addresses that supply chain strain. But they want to do that in a way that's also carbon neutral, or is emits as little carbon emissions as possible. And so you're seeing a lot of companies focusing on not just route optimization, understanding what are the best routes, again, taking in all of our data, historic data, weather data, other data sets, and then also looking at that data to understand, okay, is this going to be the best route that also reduces the emissions? Right? And so you're seeing companies start to build solutions around that as well.
Right. So talking about all these solutions that obviously Spire provides, some of the listeners now listening like, okay, that is awesome. Like I'm looking to get access to those solutions. So how does somebody get in contact with Spire? I mean, what is the process? You go to the website, do people apply? I mean, do you talk with you? Do you have to go to the convention to meet you? What is the typical
no, it's a great question, and it kind of I'll talk a little bit about our business model.
Sure,
so we're a SaaS-based B2B model. So we're a business-to-business model. We sell primarily to companies and decision makers at companies that care about our data. So our target decision maker at companies is usually a data scientist or a product manager or some sort of IT director who's buying our data.
Right.
And because we're a B2B, software as a service type company, most of the folks that are finding us are going on the web, and they're looking for specific data sets. They're looking for AIS data, or they're looking for specific solutions. And if they're looking for a specific solution, they're probably going to come up with one of our customers, right? And then they'll go to that customer, and that customer will sell them their package, right? Which is great, right? Because that's what we want.
Exactly.
Right? But if they're looking for our data specifically,
right.
Because they're building their own solution, they're building their own predictive analytics, then they'll raise their hand. They'll let us know. They'll read one of our articles. They'll download one of our case studies. They'll look at one of our videos. Maybe they'll attend one of our webcasts.